one another. But nothing moved in the community without the women. Nothing. The women chose the leaders. The women chose the medicine people. The women chose who would go out and hunt. It was the women that took care of the land. It was the women that distributed the food. It was the women that had the knowledge of the medicines. And the men supported us. We need to reclaim that right. We need to reclaim the matriarchal, matrilocal, matrilineal society that was taken away from us by the Indian Act. In 1868, this law, maybe some of you know, maybe some of you don't, but if those that of you do know, you're still going to learn this lesson. 1868 Indian Act. There was a section that was in place, section 12(1)(b). Any Indian woman who married a non-Indian or a non-status Indian man, she lost her right to be an Indian, and so did her children. But any Indian man who married a non-Indian woman, that non-Indian woman, her and her children, had the right to be Indian. Is there something wrong with this picture? Absolutely. The discrimination, the racism against women started from 1868, which is terrible. That was a means of genocide against our women. Because you see, in our traditional belief, the nation, women, right? It's the mothers that have the nation. We carry the nation. Destroying the women, you destroy the nation. That's how they attacked. The next way was attacking our children through residential schools. And in current day, they're attacking our nation through the child welfare system. And its laws, legal policies, sanctioned, supported, implemented by Canadian law. It has to change. The laws need to change, number one. Change those laws. Bust down, break down, dispel this doctrine of discovery, because it starts with that. Government and societies must recognize racism. And I ask each and every one of you here to raise this awareness that racism does exist. It does exist, and especially against First Nations people and our women. Racism is the culprit and denial is the action. The treatment of First Nations women and men by the law, by the courts, that has to change. Blame the victim is a policy that's always placed. Blame that Indian woman for her fault. Hey, you know what? Hey, she shouldn't have been a prostitute. Pamela George. Pamela George was a First Nation woman of West that was murdered by two white, affluential young men. And you know what the judge said? He told the jury, be kind to these two young men. They come from very affluential backgrounds, rich backgrounds. Be kind to them, for they knew not what they were doing. They were drunk. And you must remember that Pamela George was a prostitute. The term squaw that was given to us is very dehumanizing. It's terrible. I don't know what's worse, being called a squaw or being called an Indian princess, because being called an Indian princess is just as bad, because that's an Hollywood version. You see negative images, right? Pocahontas. We have to dispel this. We have to dispel these negative ideologies. And it goes back again to those colonial doctrines. We have to stop blaming the victim and accepting the truth and realities. Changing the laws is what's needed. And I'm a firm believer that it is the people that you have the power to put pressures on your government, put pressures on your politicians, put pressures on the lawmakers to change the laws. Change the laws, because no more can our women be murdered or go missing. No more can our children, the only hope that our children have is suicide. That's got to stop. Laws have to change in order for our people to have adequate health services, to have adequate protection by the justice system. Our women are not protected by the justice system. There's that denial, first of all, that they are abused. They're shoved under the rug, basically. They're regulated to the back of the bus, or they're not even on the bus. were thrown under the bus. Blame the victim has to end. And we have to see our women for who they are, and that is human beings, mothers, sisters, friends, contributing members of society, holders of culture, of language, and nations. We have to provide for our people's future. If a young girl at 16 years old that had everything going for her, a strong cultural, spiritual foundation, and commits suicide in her bedroom because she saw no hope, if she has no hope, well then what is there for those children that are immersed in poverty, in social, economic, dire straits? We have to change this. You all know about the suicides that are playing in those northern communities. You all read about the drug and alcohol substance abuse, prescribed medication that's plaguing those northern communities, and the lack of adequate support. But you know what? We're going to put those communities under third-party management, and we're going to pay $1 million a year to a third party to manage the books of those Indians. But we won't invest $50,000 to develop a substance abuse program. No, we won't do that. We'll spend $40 million, maybe $100 million to build a war museum to glorify war. But we're not going to invest any money to build an Indigenous center of peace and reconciliation and hope for all people. Something wrong with this picture here, right? There is a need for that inquiry on murdered and missing Aboriginal women. Why? There's a need for it not only to scope out that women are being Aboriginal women go missing or murdered, but why are they being killed? Why? Why is there the lack of support for our women? Why is there that denial by the justice system and the legal system and the courts that our women are murdered? Did you know that currently in Canada, the highest percentage of incarceration are amongst Aboriginal women? And the numbers climb each and every year. The numbers of our women that go murdered or missing climb each day. Each and every time that I'm in Winnipeg, every time I pick up the newspaper, it'll either report on they found the human remains of an Indian woman that had gone missing years before, or another one has gone missing, or another one is murdered. Read the newspapers, because every day it reports. That has to stop. And fundamentally, we attach it all back to the land. How important the land is for us. Because our women are feeling dispossessed from our right to our land. And it's not just our women that are facing discrimination and that are go murdered and missing. It's our Indian men too that go murdered and missing. In the city of Winnipeg, there's accounts now that Aboriginal or First Nation boys from the ages of 10 to 13 years old are being abducted. And I believe that they're being sold into the sex trafficking as well. So if we have no more children, first of all, if we have no more women, we have no more nations. If we have no more children, we're not going to have a future. People, our people, I believe, are our greatest natural resources. They are. We all have the right to our children. We all have the right to our grandchildren. Because each and every one of us know our children are so sacred. But our children, we have the right to our children. And I come to you from that point, my perspective, is protecting our children and protecting our women. And that Indian Act is the greatest violent weapon that was used against Indian women. It's terrible that the government of Canada, the federal government, which by the way continues to this day to determine who is an Indian and who has the right to be an Indian. And many of our Indian people by blood and culture are dispossessed from being an Indian. They will never ever be considered an Indian in the eyes of the government or First Nation. I'll use the word Indian, as a layman's term. But we know who our people are. We don't even have the right to determine our citizenship, but we continue to do so. I remember during the time when my grandfather was chief, the Indian agent told him, oh, by the way, Indian agents were not Indian. They were not. What the government used to do is that they would appoint a superintendent, and if they needed an Indian agent, they would go to the town of Maniwaki and pick the first English or Frenchman and deputize him and say, here, you're the Indian agent, now you can go and you take care of those Indians. They were overseers. We couldn't do anything at all. There's still Indian agents around today, but they're in different shapes and sizes and uniforms. They're over there at 10 Wellington and 15 Wellington Street right now, and some of them are over the provincial government because they're ready to sign away our land on a treaty. Now I lost my train of thought, and I'm sorry about that. But what was I saying before I got to that point? The Indian agents, right? How much control that they had over our lives. And it's the remnants or the legacies that continue to be here today. We have to, I'll reflect back on what one elder told me. He said, it's going to take 500 years to heal from this colonialism. But we got to start somewhere, and we have to do something. We have to decolonize. And decolonization begins in the mind. Number one, break down those colonial mentalities and doctrines. Do away with them, dispel them. And learn about the ancestral history of First Nations people, the original people. We have a vast wealth of knowledge, ancestral knowledge, traditional knowledge. And thank God that it has not all been destroyed, because it's still here. We have been a very loving, kind, sharing people for the last 521 years, and we're going to continue to be so. So, you know, our people are very welcoming. And we thank you for organizing this, to give us that opportunity to share with you our thoughts, our beliefs, our experiences, and what we think that's necessary to move forward, to build, not reconciliation, but a new relationship, a nation-to-nation relationship between the original people and Canadians. We're all in this together. We're not going anywhere. And through, as my grandfather said, let the Algonquin people be the driving force. We have our knowledge, and we will share with all of you. We will come together to make a better country and a better life for all people, for all children. So I leave you with this message, and go out there and come and share this with others. And if you have a thunder in your soul or fire in your heart, be passionate about this and demand change, demand justice, demand that your politicians, your government people, your agencies are going to listen, and they will listen to you. They will. They won't listen to us, but they will listen to you.
No.
Well, okay, maybe not this government, okay?
Right.
Heard the Unitarians too.
But if you go back to what Chief Whiteduck said, it's got to come from the grassroots, the people, the people. And I believe, and I have to believe this, I have to have faith in this, what the old man always said, you just got to keep educating them, and people will listen. If you educate one, that one will educate two, and that two will educate four, and so on. Let's just keep the movement going, the movement, the circle, keep it moving. And I hope that I've shared with you some knowledge that will help you when you stand before the United Nations and bring forward. Because to sum it up, it's about people and it's about land, and that we need to have the right to our land. Because from that land flows our life, flows our ceremonies, flows our teachings, flows our laws, and flows a relationship with the land and with people. So thank you very much, Jimmy Butch.